Hi, my name is Mary, and I made a video about 5 years ago. I've been a knitter since I was a child. My grandmother taught me. And then 6 years ago, I had my right arm amputated because of cancer. And 3 weeks after the amputation, I figured out a way to knit with one hand. I had started knitting afghans for my grandchildren. I had finished the second one 2 days before the amputation, and then I figured out and I did the third one, and I made a video after I finished that one and gave that to my granddaughter, and I put a picture of that in. Well, it's been 5 years, and I had 5 more afghans to do, and I have done them, and I'm completing the last and 8th one. I did want to show you how I sew it together because I have a technique that's a little different than I've ever seen anywhere. I'm sure you know how to sew knitting together using the mattress stitch. There are lots of videos about that. The good part about that is it looks just beautiful from the right side, and you can hardly tell where the seam is. But there is a ridge on the wrong side. There are 2 extra stitches. And I wanted this afghan to be reversible. The pattern is reversible, and I wanted the afghan to be a reversible one, so I didn't use that method. I used a different method, and I'm going to show that to you now, and one of my daughters is going to help me do that. This is my daughter, and this one is mostly sewn together. By the way, if you look and see the seam, it doesn't matter which yarn you use. The colors here are very different, the gold and the navy. That's what my youngest grandson wanted. And you can see it's not perfect, but it's not bad. You can really use either color you want. So what I do first is pin it together. But I don't use sewing pins because, for one thing, they get lost in the knitting and they're sharp. So I use these little clips. I bought a whole bunch of them inexpensively from Amazon. And this pattern, you have to match the ridges. I think you can see how there are ridges. Remember, it's a 3-row repeat, and then you do 3 on the other side, 3, 3. So the ridges exactly match. So do you want to go ahead and pin those together? You just pick up and make sure you get a ridge together. I can do the sewing together, but it was exceedingly tedious. I had to pin it all to a foam block and take about 3 stitches and then repin it all, and it was just taking forever. And fortunately, I have 2 daughters, both of which offered to help me, and they've done it. Okay, this thread, this was the leftover at the beginning here, and we've already started here. So what you do is take about 3 just plain running stitches just through the tops of the pieces, through the knots. This is one of those, you don't have to, you can pull it all or not. You want to take 3 stitches, at the most 4, but I would say 3. Yeah, you don't want to get it knotted. Okay. Then you pull it tight so that you don't have any slack in there. No slack left. Then grab the bottom of where you started and the top and pull it so there's enough give in there with your running thread as there is in your knitting. You don't want to have that seam too tight. And then this is the key part. Now you take what is called a locking stitch. You just take the same last stitch you did again. Go exactly over where you did again. I learned this stitch in needlepoint, or actually counted cross stitch. And wait a minute, now you did that, okay. Now try to pull that. You just can't pull it, it locks it. And therefore that's never gonna gather up on you. Now you're ready to go again and take 3 more. 3 or 4. You've heard, I'm sure, the expression there are no knots in knitting. Well, the locking stitch is actually not a knot, K-N-O-T, but it does secure it right there, and it makes a big difference. I once did a project where I just did a whole running stitch and then it got caught on something and gathered up the whole, it was the sleeve of a sweater. So I have used this locking stitch ever since I learned it. Okay, and then you just keep going, and as soon as we finish this, and so in the end it'll be all done. And this is the 8th one. This one is 7 stripes. I did with the same colors for another grandson. There was 5 stripes, but this has 7 stripes, 4 navy and 3 gold. This grandson is not yet ready to go to college. In fact, he's 13 today, and but he knows where he wants to go, but he just has the loyalty to, this is where his father went and so forth, so he has loyalty. So I thought that might be interesting to see another way to sew things together. I was just going to do a quick review of the knitting. If you need more detail, you can go to the first video. You remember that I found this knitting belt on Etsy with the holes, and that holds the right-hand needle, which is so helpful. And then I have a new necklace with the Portuguese knitting pin. Again, I got this on Etsy, and I thought it was so pretty, and the lady very nicely made it so it went all the way around my neck and so forth. I was very happy with that. Since I'm finished with the Afghans, I want to do something completely different. And I heard about a scarf called a palindrome scarf. I've always been fascinated by palindromes, both in numbers and in words. A palindrome is a word that's spelled the same forwards and backwards, like mom, M-O-M, dad, D-A-D. But then there's some more interesting ones like madam, I'm Adam. And in Northern California, there's a town called Wairika. And in Wairika is the Wairika Bakery. And that's spelled the same forwards and backwards. Probably the longest one I know is a man, a plan, a canal, Panama. But this is a palindrome scarf. It's a cable scarf, but you can see that's the front with the cables. But then when you look at the back, it's exactly the same. It matches front and back. It's the same forwards and backwards. So that's why it's a palindrome. Now I want to show you how I knit with it. Put the working yarn around the Portuguese knitting pin, and then around my middle finger. This scarf is mostly done in ribbing knit 2, purl 2. So you remember knit, you go in and you put it in front of the other needle, flip it over, and take it out the same way you went in, the knit stitch. Again, in, around, out, and off. Now I do have to flick the working yarn to the front, because purling you do all in the front, in and then take it out the back, in, around, out the back, and off. Then I flick it to the front again and do 2 more knits. So that's just a quick review, and I don't think I covered ribbing last time, so now you know how to do ribbing. I have 8 grandchildren, and I'll finish by showing you the 8 Afghans that I knitted. The first one for my oldest grandchild, I had both hands to do that one. I used the same pattern my mother had used, but I let them pick their colors, and she picked green and white because it went with her bedspread and other things. The second one I did was for my grandson Anders Chang, who is doing this video. Thank you, Anders. Anders went to the University of California at Berkeley. The colors are navy blue and gold, and that's what he picked. He's also about 6'6", so his had to be extra long, as you see. I finished his 2 days before the amputation, so you can see I have my right arm in that picture. Then I figured out how to knit with one hand, and the next granddaughter picked her colors at Thanksgiving, and I finished it by August when she was ready to go off to college. And she just picked colors she liked. The next one is Anders' sister, and she goes to the University of California at Davis. The colors are the same as Berkeley, but she didn't want hers just like her brother's. First, she thought she wanted just 2 shades of blue, but I said I could make a narrow gold stripe in there, and she liked that idea. As long as you do the same number of ridges, you can make the stripes any width you want, and it will match up. The next one was for this grandson. I asked him what colors he liked, and he said, I don't know. And his mother said, take him to the store. He'll pick out what he likes. Sure enough, he walked in right away, picked out that royal blue, the cardinal red, and the light silvery gray. And he designed how wide all the stripes should be. He's also tall. He's a rower, and that's why he's in his shorts. The next granddaughter, from birth, her favorite colors have been purple and yellow, so that's what she wanted. It's in the shadow, so it doesn't show up real well, but if you saw it, it's definitely purple and yellow. The next granddaughter, we talked about a lot of possibilities of colors. She doesn't have a definite favorite. And then I said, well, what about rainbow? And she liked that idea. So this has a red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, pink stripe. And she was pleased with that. And the last one, which I just finished, he roots for the Berkeley teams. So he wanted navy and gold also. So that is my 8th and final Afghan. 2 with 2 hands and 6 with 1 hand. I didn't talk about this in the first video, but I did want to mention that I am a person of faith. I have been a Christian since I was a child, and that has been a major factor in my dealing with the amputation. There are 2 big lessons that I learned. When I first was diagnosed with the cancer and had the first surgery, I said to the doctor, do you think you got it all? And he said, yes, so I relaxed. Well, the pathology came back that the margins weren't clean, so I had to have a second surgery in less than a month, and a much bigger one with a skin graft. And then I had to have radiation, and do you think it's done? Yes. Well, in less than 6 months it was back. And I, all in all, had about 10 surgeries, 3 rounds of radiation. Chemo doesn't work on sarcoma, so I never did have that. But I was starting to worry a lot about it. When was it going to come back, and if, and so forth. And the Bible's very clear. Do not worry. Who of you can add 1 hour to your life by worrying? The antidote for me to worry is gratitude. And when worry thoughts would creep in, I would start giving thanks. I must have thanked God dozens of times that I was the one that had the cancer and not one of my children or grandchildren. I thanked him that I had a good doctor and good medical care, that I had a supportive family, and so forth. It would just go on. And as I gave thanks, the worry thoughts would just disappear. The other thing that I learned, I thought I knew what it was to trust God, but I learned about a deeper trust. Because in the beginning, I would pray that I would be healed and have no more cancer. And then, as I mentioned, every time it would come back in a matter of a few months. And I would always be a little bit disappointed. And I would pray that again and hope that it wouldn't come back, but then it would. And then I read a quote by Jim Elliot, who was a martyred missionary in the 1950s. You can look him up on Wikipedia or Google his name. He said, "Those who want God's best always leave the choice with him." And I puzzled over what that meant. And I finally decided God was asking me to really trust him. So I changed the way I prayed. And I said, "God, whatever you have for me, whatever my journey is, that's what I want. As long as you're with me, I'll take whatever it is." And then when the amputation came, I knew that that was his plan for me. That was part of my journey, and that he would be with me. And he has been. And that's made all the difference. He gives me joy and peace every day. Romans 15:13 says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." And that would be my wish for you too.